Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome to part 3 of the Guide to Freelancing on Turbo 360. In part 2, we discussed how to set up your portfolio and how to tailor your portfolio for different kinds of freelancing assignments, startups versus conventional businesses, things like that. And so once you have that ready, we are now ready to move on to part 3, which is actually sourcing leads and finding clients and things like that. I should point out though that if you don't have the materials you need from part 2, don't even bother trying to do find leads and work through the content in part 3 this video, because if you don't have a solid portfolio, really none of this matters. Everything works off your portfolio. It's very important to understand that. So one thing that I try to explain to people who come to my open workshops in person in New York City is that if they don't have a good portfolio, I really can't help them. Very often there are two kinds of people who struggle finding leads, those with good portfolios and those without. And those without a good portfolio, there's just nothing you can do. They're not going to have success in this endeavor unless they get lucky, like they have a family member who helps them out, something like that. But if you have a good portfolio, you can still have trouble finding leads for a variety of reasons. Those people I can help, and those people, that's what this series is tailored for. So if you don't have at least 3 good projects that you can fall back on and point to, this is going to be a struggle for you. So make sure you have part 2 worked out before you move on to part 3. But assuming you did, let's get into it. So so yeah, finding leads as a freelance engineer is something you're going to be doing pretty much all the time. You're never really not prospecting, or at least you shouldn't be, because it's not like the reason is because that within the startup context, closing a deal can take anywhere from 5 days, 3 days to 4, 6 weeks. 4, 6, 7 weeks. So it's not a predictable outcome. It's not a predictable sequence of events all the time. I've had deals that I've closed in literally one day. Like from when I say one day, I mean I reached out to them that day. They got back to me that day, and we closed the deal that day. It's exceedingly rare. It's probably only happened, once or twice. It actually did happen last summer. And that's usually that happens as a matter of desperation. And then I've had deals that took literally 4 or 5 weeks to close. So it's really hard to say without experiencing it. So you want to sort of keep your pipeline full. And sometimes there are leads that kind of just drag their heels forever. And if something better comes along, then just if it fits your rate, if it fits your skill set, just go ahead and take it. Anyway, let's get into how to actually develop this pipeline and find these leads. So again, just to reiterate, none of this matters if you don't have a strong portfolio already in place. So make sure you go through all of part 2 and prepare your portfolio with your website and your resume accordingly. Otherwise, none of this is going to really help out no matter what. So, okay, just punching up my notes here. Okay, so you want to start simple. Just hit up Craigslist, hit up LinkedIn, find whatever leads that fit your skill set, and just email them out. That's good for startups or for the conventional business route. This is helpful in determining how successful your response ratio is. So if you're sending out, let's say, I don't know, 50 emails on Craigslist, off LinkedIn, off of Indeed, maybe Angellist, right? And you send out like a total of 50, getting no responses. Well, that tells you something. So you need to tailor either your copy or your portfolio, most likely, or your cover letter or whatever, your resume. You need to improve that. But typically for me, if I send out 10 inquiries, I'll probably get around 6 or 7 responses, which basically means we'd like to speak to you and learn more about you and figure out whether or not there's a good fit. So it's not 100%, but it's good enough that I can keep my pipeline full. And that is from what I just listed: Craigslist, Angellist, LinkedIn, not Indeed. I don't do Indeed as much, but those are the major ones. So you definitely want to follow up on that. And then what you really want to do is get used to the sort of the conversation the dance, the give and take dance that takes place. Once you go through enough of these conversations, they start to follow a pattern, and then you can be comfortable with how the conversation will progress. And you'll have a certain set of stock answers ready. You'll be able to come up with an appropriate response because you've already heard certain questions, or you've heard certain concerns from clients, and you've already, or potential clients, and you've already dealt with that. And so you want to get used to that. This is the key here. You want to get used to that so you can improve that initial stage of the conversation. So you want to get through maybe at least 10, 20 of those. So the idea isn't so much to get a job or a freelance gig right away, although it would be great if that's what happened. But the idea is really to get your reps in and really figure out where the cycle is breaking down, and then get better at your rap. Get better at your spiel, I guess. Your pitch is the best way to put it. Get better at your pitch. And that only comes through practice, right? So you can't really get better at it unless you're doing it in a consistent basis. So you want to reach out to as many as you can that fit a certain criteria. Obviously, like it shouldn't be like a WordPress gig unless you want to be a WordPress developer. But if you want to be a startup developer, don't reach out to WordPress contracts. But the idea is you want to reach out to everything that fits your criteria and try to get input, interaction, give and take, and then get better at answering certain questions, handling certain scenarios, get better at taking charge of a conversation. This is very important, is learning how to control a conversation, or better yet, when to control a conversation. This is a very, it's more of an art than a science, but you have to know when to step in and take command of the conversation, when to pull back, and when not to be assertive. And certain times it's one and the other, and you have to kind of understand where that falls. Within the startup track, it's simple. If the startup founders are newer, and this is their first startup, they've raised maybe a moderate amount, so like under $50,000. So maybe like they've raised $30,000. This is their first try. And you can kind of sense they're not as confident, right? You should take command of that conversation. Your goal in that conversation is to make them feel confident in you. It's a very important thing to be able to recognize and to utilize. Then there's the people who are like, I've done this already. This is my third startup. We raised $2 million. We raised $4 million. Like, I'm not a rookie here. That's different, and you don't want to be as a starter. You want to be more information gathering, like, okay, what stack have you decided to use? How are you deploying it? Is it Amazon, DigitalOcean? Like you want to get more information there. So it's a different tone, a different dynamic in that conversation. My point is, you have to understand when to do A versus B, and the only real way you can do that is by having several of these conversations. In my case, well into the hundreds. So you really have to understand when to push certain buttons and when not to. So what you want to do is reach out to a bunch of listings on Craigslist, and it's sort of the low-hanging fruit. Like you don't go to Craigslist to find your career, but you're not going to find a high-ranking Google software position on Craigslist, right? But that's not the point. You're not going to get that anyway. What you want is to get a lot of reps, talk to a lot of people, and get better at the whole process of talking, of selling yourself, and getting better at conveying confidence and instilling confidence in hopefully your client. It's very important. So let's see here. That's more for the startup track. If you're doing a conventional business track, like let's say you want to do lots of websites, high volume websites for local businesses, lawyers, accountants, restaurants, places like that. A good strategy that I find effective is to go on Yelp or Google Places or both, and find two categories of businesses. One, businesses whose websites are just terrible and they just need a facelift. Chances are they already know that, and they haven't really found a good solution yet. Or number two, a new business. a business that just opened or that's still getting set up, and they don't have all their their online presence set up yet. They don't have a Facebook page. They don't have a like an Instagram page or whatever. And they have like a a very simple Squarespace integration with like just a basic template and like welcome to my my jewelry store, and like that's it. And like so they need your help, and just blast email as many as you can. Typically their contact information is on the website itself, so it's easy to track these down and just blast them out. And that's exactly what you want to do. Now, in both cases, you have to be prepared for a very, very low response rate. When I say low, I mean like 1 out of 50 low, 1 out of 30, like, but well below 5%. You're going to get rejected a lot, okay? And in the case of the conventional businesses where you're just doing cold emails, not only are you going to get rejected, some people are going to be hostile with you. And be ready for that and accept it. And when it happens, just either don't respond at all or respond back with, I'm sorry I bothered you. I apologize. Best of luck with your new business. And that's it. I'm telling you all this from personal experience. All this has happened to me. So just be ready for a very, very low response rate. Again, 1 out of 50, like 2%, that bad. Okay? Which brings me to another point. If you can't handle that kind of rejection, just quit right now. Just stop watching this video and quit. The reality of my freelance life is a reality of rejection. Okay, and you just have to accept that, and that's it. If you can't handle it, just quit. Find a full-time job where you might be happier just programming all day and doing just regular software engineering, and letting the company worry about the sales. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I've given that some thought myself. But I enjoy my freelance life. I enjoy my sort of my nomadic lifestyle. Well, not literally nomadic. I've been in the city for a long time, but sort of my I get to do different projects and work on different things. And if I don't like a certain project after a while, or if my client's being a prick, I can just move on, like things like that. And it's a little bit tougher if your full-time boss is being a prick, and it's kind of more like, I'm kind of stuck here. Anyway, that's a different conversation. So, but it comes with a flip side. The flip side is I deal with a ton of rejection. You really have to understand that. So, last year, 2017, I was rejected a lot. That was a particularly bad year of rejection. I was rejected because I was raising financing for Turbo. So I was rejected a ton in that area too. I was getting a lot of investors telling me to scram, but I was getting a lot of contract work. Excuse me. I'm going to have to pause the video for a moment because I just found a spider and that's going to bother me the whole time. So let me just take care of this right away. So, okay, I got the spider, so it's taken care of. If you're an animal rights person, don't worry, I didn't kill it. I threw it out the window, so it should still be alive. All right, so let's get back to business here. So what I was saying was that the amount of rejection you have to be ready for as a freelance engineer is very, very high, and you just have to accept it. Last year, I got rejected a lot. What you have to understand is you get rejected for reasons that are not always valid. So oftentimes you're being evaluated by a person who's not a very good programmer or not a programmer at all. So they're evaluating you on erroneous criteria. I did a whole video just on this actually, and that happens. So I get told that I'm a bad programmer a couple times a year. I got told that I was not a very good programmer on my YouTube channel. Somebody left a comment on one of my videos saying that for somebody who says he's a good developer, your websites don't look very impressive, right? And so the point is that he was critiquing my coding skill on the appearance of my websites. So in other words, he didn't factor in, or she didn't factor in, that I built the entire infrastructure where you can host the actual websites, host and deploy the websites, including the actual underlying architecture with the corresponding command line interface and things like that. So what this person didn't recognize, he didn't understand that there's a whole level of skill beyond which he was looking at. probably because he's not aware that this level of skill even exists. Now, this is sort of a beginner mentality. I used to be like this 6 years ago, 2012, where I didn't know how good I wasn't, so I thought I was actually pretty good, right? And then after a couple more years of programming, I realized like, oh my God, there's so much I didn't know, and it just kept on going from there. And so I have sort of like secondhand embarrassment now. When I was 6 years younger, thinking I was a good developer, I'm not. I wasn't. Today, I feel pretty good about my skill set, but the main point is how I feel doesn't matter. It's how the market responds to my skill set. So the point is, sometimes you're rejected on reasons that are completely not valid. And so you have to understand when that's happening versus when it's not happening. But the point is, you're going to get rejected. That's my point, a lot. So you need to be prepared for that. Okay. Next thing is you want to go out and meet people. This is a very common piece of advice. If you're in an urban area, you want to go out and meet people at meetups, social events that are focused on tech. So anything that's an event party, like a release party, something like that. Or mostly meetups is where people go for this sort of thing. But generally, the advice falls along these lines. Go out, meet people, make contacts, and then see if anyone needs a programmer, is hiring. See if anyone is hiring, right? And that works, but I don't think that's the best strategy. A couple reasons. Number one, everyone else is doing the same thing, so you're just dealing with a lot of people who are you're dealing with a bunch of people in a room who are kind of trying to sell to each other. It's kind of like, two magnets with the same polarity, they just reject each other. It's kind of like that. And so I've been to hundreds of meetups. I host a meetup. So like the whole meetup environment, it's kind of, you have to, first of all, the meetups themselves, you have to figure out which ones are good versus which ones aren't. They're not all created equal, right? Generally speaking, you want to go to meetups that have that obviously attract a higher caliber of individual and a higher caliber of company. But the question then is, how do you identify those meetups? You want to find meetups that are a little bit more higher niche, like AWS Lambda meetup, New York City. That's a niche style meetup, like GraphQL meetup in New York City. This is a good meetup to attend because those are highly niche specific skills in areas that are pretty sophisticated, right? If you just go to like beginner JavaScript meetup, you're not going to get any work leads there. That's not really good, or like NYC programmers, like that's not, you're going to get a lot of time wasters. So that's the main thing about this piece of advice that people don't really get into, is the sheer number of time wasters there are out there. There are a lot of people who just waste your time. That's just across the board. And so you're going to find a lot of these people at meetups. There are people who go to meetups just to go to meetups. Like that. This might be probably just a New York City thing, or probably like a densely urban area thing, but there are people who go to meetups who just like want to hang out. Right? They have nothing else going on in their lives, and they'll just go to meetups. And there are people who go to meetups to meet girls, stuff like that. You need to avoid those meetups that attract those kinds of people, right? So, because they will just waste your time. So, I would recommend going to meetups that have a more niche focus in an area, not geographic area, like a topical area that is sophisticated, right? So React Native meetup, New York City. That's a pretty good one. GraphQL Apollo in New York City. That's probably pretty solid. Avoid Brooklyn Tech Meetup. That's too broad. You're going to get too many jokers, too many people wasting your time. That you want to look at it that way. Now the meetup strategy in general, though, in my experience, is better if you're doing one of two things. You're either hosting the meetup, which has its own challenges, like where are you going to set it up and things like that, or you're speaking at the meetup, like you're a featured presenter or you're a presenter in some sort, right? Now you don't have to be a featured presenter like, CTO of a major tech company, you wouldn't be watching this video if that was the case. It could be more like project showcase, right? So the meetup is intended to showcase projects from people. And so as long as you have a project to showcase, you can try and get in on that. Try to ask the organizers if you can be one of the people, and that's it. And basically the point of this is you want to be in the meetup in a position of authority. You want to be someone that the people go to see, whether it's literally you, which is probably not going to be the case, but you're on a panel that people are invited to see, and that gives you immediate credibility, and it makes you seem a little bit more credible as a professional. Now, I've used this to effect for 3 years. So I started doing meetups in the city in 2015, so I guess a little 2.5 years, whatever. And I would do meetups in front of like business schools and business groups and things like that. And then I would get leads off that. I would close deals off that because I would present for like an hour and a half, and I would even do a little bit of code in front of the room on the TV, so that people would just literally watch my skill live, right? And then that would lead to people reaching out to me afterwards, saying, I have this project and I want to work with someone like you on it. What's your rate? Stuff like that. That happened a couple times, and I've made a decent amount of money that way. And so the point is, you want to get in front of a lot of people. You kind of want to meet a lot of people, not like one at a time handing out your business card and stuff like that. I mean, you can do that, and I have seen it work. One of my friends just got a job that way, or actually two of my friends in the last 9 months found work exactly that way. This one guy went to a meetup for data science, and he was wearing a t-shirt that said Python Django, and that was enough for some other company to walk up to him and say, hey, do you do Python Django? What's your name? What are you working on? It led to a conversation, and it worked out for him. He's still working there. He's very happy. So that has worked. But the point for him in particular worked because he went to a very specific niche meetup. It was an artificial intelligence meetup for a specific library. I forget the name of the library, but it was a specific framework or library for artificial intelligence. It wouldn't just attract the everyday, like, oh, I want to learn programming. Like, it wouldn't draw that person. So for him, it worked effectively that way. What you want to do is either go that route or somehow be in a focal point of the meetup, if you can swing that. And if you're in New York City and you want to pursue this strategy, feel free to reach out to me, and you can use my meetup as your audience if you want. And if I have enough people, then I'll do that. I'm happy to use my meetup in my space and all that if it helps my Turbo community, right? So if you're just a random guy asking me for stuff, then I'm not going to help you. But if you're on Turbo and you're using Turbo and you're trying to get better on Turbo, then you're more than welcome to use my meetup to showcase your projects in front of, you'll probably get 25 or some odd people, and in New York City, Midtown Manhattan, why not? And if I like what you're working on, then I'd be more than happy to help out in this regard. So that's a good thing. So as far as meetups goes, it's not just go and meet people and network. That whole connotation is really not good in tech, at least. You get a lot of people who don't know what they're talking about, and basically, as far as tech goes, you are one of those people. Those people who don't know what they're talking about, time wasters, until proven otherwise. So you're sort of in an uphill battle right away, right? So whether it's fair or not, that's just how things have sort of materialized. So what you want to do is run meetups in somehow as a position of authority, either as the organizer, which again I understand can be a little bit challenging, but maybe just a panel member, a presenter, one of 5 presenters. That's pretty good too. And if you have anything to show, which you should, again, you should have something to show, because if you don't, none of this matters. But if you have anything to show, and you can speak at length about it from a technical implementation standpoint, you keep doing that, you will find leads in New York City, San Francisco, Boston, places like that. Dude, that will work, and maybe even like places like Philadelphia and Chicago. Like cities that are not as tech heavy, but that's good because then you would be one of a few people in the city of Chicago that can really do hardcore React Redux stack. Like, I've never been to Chicago, but I would bet if I can go to Chicago today, March 24th, 2018, by the end of April, I will be a busy contractor in Chicago. If anyone wants to finance my 3 months in Chicago to take me up on that bet, I will take you up on that bet, and I will make it work. And I promise I can make it work in a city like Chicago, Philadelphia, Miami, non-tech centric cities, because it's all about how to present yourself and present yourself as a knowledgeable source of information, as a reliable resource. And that's the key. That's the key. So that's the whole, get out there and meet people advice. You got to be a little bit more strategic about it. It's a little bit more nuts and bolts about that. Once you are in front of a room and you have an audience of 10, 15, 20 people, always make sure you have a website to direct those people to, and that should be the last thing they see. It should be the first thing they see and the last thing they see. So you introduce yourself. Hey, my name is Dan. I'm working on a AWS Lambda serverless integration for serverless functions. Here's my website, and then get into your shit. Get into your spiel. Take up your amount of time, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and at the end, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed my presentation. You can reach me here, turbo360.com, or this website right here, and leave that in their brain. Okay, this is very important. Also, very often overlooked by people who don't know how to market themselves, and they forget why they're there. And it's a very important thing to remember. Don't forget why you're there. If you're in front of a room of 15 people, you're there to sell your service. So if you talk about your technology for a half hour and your implementation and how you got certain things to work, that's great. But then if you forget the close, which is reach me here, here's my email, website, here's how you can contact me. You can put up your number if you're comfortable with it, whatever, Facebook, Instagram, whatever. Get it all on there and say, if you want to reach me, I'm available for consulting work. Don't call it freelancing. Don't call it contracting. Call it consulting. To my clients, I'm a consultant. I'm not a freelancer. I'm a consultant. And the difference is about $50 an hour extra. So that's the difference. So understand that. So let's see here. Okay, moving on. So another area for leads that are getting, so I want to discuss each sort of lead website individually, strengths and weaknesses. So Craigslist is an obvious one just for blasting out a bunch of emails and seeing what comes back and developing a sort of a dialogue, right? And then again, the idea there is not so much to get work, which if you get work, great, but the idea there is to get better at your pitch. Craigslist is obviously full of bottom feeders, people who are looking for free work, people who want you to be their partner on the next big billion-dollar website, whatever. You're going to get all that nonsense. Don't apply to those guys because that won't even help you from a pitch standpoint, because those aren't the people you want to pitch anyway. About 1 in 50 are legitimate, leads, an actual company with money. Actually, I pulled up a few. I saved a few for the purposes of this video. So let me go find them first. I don't want to just poke around. All right, I found them. I took screenshots. These will also be on the download package for this guide to freelancing, so this will be included. So let's go through some of the ones on Craigslist that I found. that are both good and bad. So here's one right here. Web application development, subcontractor. So you can tell right away this is not a recruiter. Recruiters have certain formattings and ways of putting up posts that that make it very obvious. You generally want to avoid the recruiters. I'll get into that later, but this is the point. Is this is not a recruiter, so you can tell that it's they're using Jest, so they have the right words for testing frameworks, React, unit testing, C#. That means they're probably a .NET server. They're using .NET on the back end. Obviously GitHub. So right off the bat, you can tell certain things about their stack. Now you want to have that knowledge going in for the phone call, because if you can get those observations and conclusions in on the phone call, then they can tell right off the bat that you know what you're talking about. This one I actually closed, and I put it through. So what I did in the last 4 weeks is I actually contacted some of these for a couple of reasons. Number one, I felt kind of awkward doing a freelancing video without actively freelancing myself. I felt like a bit of a fraud. So what I spent the past month doing is getting just sort of making sure I was still sharp. And I did exactly that. I sent out a bunch of stuff using the exact strategies that I'm showing you here. In fact, I'm showing you the actual posts. And then I just want to make sure that I still kind of had my game down. Like my game was still tight. Today is March 24th, 2018. The last lead that I closed actively contracting was midsummer last year, so July of 2017. And then after that, I just went to turbo full time. So I hadn't really been in the contract game for about 8-9 months. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't selling a pile of horse shit, because I don't feel good about that. So I spent a month getting back in the contract game, and it's still the same. Nothing changed. So it's good to know that these things still work. I closed 3 deals. I turned down 2 of them. I turned down one outright. I handed off the other to a subcontractor, and then I took this one on my own because it was easy money. I had such negotiating leverage. I bargained my highest rate, and they just said yes, because I was like, otherwise I just won't do it then. Like, I'm not going to pull down on my rate, because I didn't even really want the work. I was doing it for the benefit of this video. And so I was like, well, then I just won't do it. And they're like, all right, we'll do your rate then. Anyway, so the point is, you can tell by the terminology, the language in this post, that it's by developers. It's not a what do you call a recruiter. It's an actual dev shop, and so that's good. And that they're using React, right? Deep knowledge of React, which tells me right away they have a React code base that grew out of their ability to manage it. They grew beyond their means of control. That happens all the time. That's pretty much the only contract work I've seen in the past 1.5 years anyway. So that's a good lead off Craigslist, and it materialized. This one closed in about a week. So 2 phone calls, 1 Slack conversation, contract signed, whatever. Okay, so on to the next one. So this one is yeah, this one's good. Same thing, same deal. Good hourly rate. Decent hourly rate for if you're not heavily experienced. You can tell that he's not a recruiter. I mean, he basically just came out and completely denigrated recruiters. So, this is a good one off Craigslist, right? Another one here is a bad one. So here, this is your typical idea guy. Basically, he thinks he brings way more to the table than he actually does. He's overvaluing his idea. He wants you to be a partner. He's going to ask you to work for equity, work all your free time for equity, things like that. This is more typical on Craigslist. So you're going to see a lot of these, obviously, and not as many as these. So these sort of good leads are probably 1 out of 50 or so. You get a lot more of these. So don't even reply to these ones. That's why it says bad. Don't even reply, because they're going to waste your time. There's going to be no benefit, and they will waste your time. Like, for example, if if this, or better yet, if this one responded to you and you went through an interview process and you didn't get the offer, which is too bad, it's still constructive. It's still constructive because it'll give you a good idea of what kind of questions you need to be prepared to handle, how you're going to come up with a better response the next time. It'll make you better at that part of the process. Right? So that's why you want to reach out to these companies anyway. Obviously, this one is good based on the rate. This is a recruiter email. Excuse me. Recruiters all do it like this. They just bullet point, a bunch of skills and whatnot, and it's pretty obvious. Basically, recruiter posts almost always look like this. They just bullet point all the stuff, and it's like you got to be an expert in this and that, and like Angular, Cordova, and Ionic framework and whatever. Like some of the stuff is just so like. The one that I got here, right? He was like, the first guy I talked to was like, yeah, you're gonna need to know Angular 2 and TypeScript. Are you okay with that? And I was like, yeah, it's fine. I can handle that. But he was not the programmer. He was a PM. So then when I talked to the actual lead programmer, he was like, Angular 2. He's like, we don't even touch that stuff. We're like, TypeScript. Like, where did you get that from? And I was like, I don't know. It's just what he said. So. Like, just the inaccuracies are stunning because I think people oftentimes don't understand how big of a difference that is. To say like, oh, we use TypeScript without knowing what TypeScript is, you're turning away people. Like, people might be like, well, I don't want to do this then. But this project in particular does not use TypeScript, so I don't really understand how this happens, but it happens. So. My point there is if you see a lot of, like, if you see like 4 things like React, Redux, ES6 JavaScript, let's say those 3 you're good on, and then the last thing it says is Angular 2, right? And they're like, oh shoot, I don't do Angular 2, screw it, I'm not going to apply. Don't take that attitude, wrong attitude. Apply anyway and see what happens. And then even though you're going in, let's say behind the 8 ball, like you're at a disadvantage, do it just for the experience. Get those questions in, get the experience in, figure out what to expect, and then understand how to get better next time. Because otherwise, the next time when the job is right, you won't get it. You don't want that to happen, obviously. So, so this is another good one. Even though it is a recruiter, same thing, just follow up with it anyway because the rate is competitive. So generally you want to find ones with the rate explicitly noted. When they don't explicitly note the rate, it's a pretty bad sign. It's not always bad. It's just one negative point. It's one strike. And let's say there's a 3-strike limit. Well, that's one strike. It's like this had one strike. The rate was not this one. Sorry, this one had one strike. The rate wasn't listed, so that's strike 1, but there was no strike 2 or strike 3 because it was not a recruiter. It didn't say work for equity, none of that stuff. It was only one strike, so it was worth the risk. So let's see here. So that's number 4. Okay, here's another one. So this one is got that strike, right? There's no rate, so base salary and profit share. It looks like a recruiter, but I'm going to go with no. This is actually written by the people in the startup. The good thing about this is that they're using the right vocabulary. Mean stack, MVP, CTO. What that means is they understand the startup ecosystem. They understand the game. That's important. Right? You want to talk to people who understand the game, because that just smooths out the process. Like if they don't understand equity and options, and those are the people who think like the idea is worth like 80% of the company, and they want to give up like 1% of the company to their lead CTO. And I've had these conversations. It's very exhausting. I don't have time for it anymore. It's not, like I just didn't even get back to these people. But those are the people who don't understand the game. Like they're like, I want to hire a lead engineer CTO for a low ball salary, $30,000 a year, because I'm going to offer him 1% equity. And it's like, I can't, you can't communicate with these people. So those people don't understand the game. So you need to just identify them and move on. These guys look like they understand it, because again, they have the right vocabulary, right? So Mongo, Express, Angular 1, which is a strange decision, but Firebase, I think they meant Linux here. I don't know what WK, all this stuff means. But the point is that it looks like they understand the environment from a business point of view as well as a technical point of view. There are drawbacks because of the lack of an explicit rate, and it's a full-time thing. It's not a contract gig. So I have successfully negotiated these into contracts, by the way. What you want to do is reach out to a company like this and say, hey, look, I like what you guys are doing. I think it's pretty exciting, but I need to make sure that this is a company I want to work with long term, so that if you're willing to do a contract on a trial basis, 2 or 3 months, and then we can revisit at the end of that contract whether or not this is a good full-time fit, then I'd be happy to have that conversation. That's something we can discuss as we get to it. Doesn't always work, but it has worked for me in the past. So it's worth trying on certain startups on something like this. And again, if that doesn't work here, even if you get a call back in a 20-minute phone conversation, that's still constructive. So you want to look at it from that point of view. Okay, so here's Angellist. Angellist is it's becoming a bit more and more like Craigslist. You're getting a lot of idea guys. People want you to work for a low ball rate and then equity. So like here's an example: 35 to 60K, quarter of a percent. These are very typical sort of idea guys, right? So you get a lot more of these on Angellist. On Angellist, what you want to do, whoops, is go on the jobs section and then filter by contract, location, and stack. All right, so you want to filter by contract, remote, front end, back end, whatever, right? And then you go through your listings here, right? So I'll just go through these right now. I haven't seen these before. So the ones that are overseas, I usually skip right off the bat just because I'm not familiar with the culture, right? So I don't want to get into that mess. So I just skip that. The only exception is UK. So UK is fine. So here, what you want to look at first is the price, right? These are all contract gigs. The problem with here, the price, is that you get basically 3 zones, and the zones are, low, $1,000 to $20,000. That's low. Maybe $25,000, whatever. And then you get the next zone, typically around 40K to 90K, right? That's zone 2. And then zone 3 is 90K and up, right? 6 figures basically. Now, ironically, you don't want zone 3, 90K and up. There are no contracts that open up in 90K. That's a full-time role masquerading as a contract. And I've made the mistake of engaging with these companies for like 3 interviews, and then to find out like after like phone calls and interviews and coding challenges that they're hiring for full-time, right? And I was like, no, it says contract here. Why are we having this conversation? It's like, and they're like, well, we don't want you. We want to hire someone full-time. It's like, you didn't say that. It says contract on your Angellist profile. This happens a lot. So basically what you want to do is you want to rule out everything that says 90K and up. Those are not contracts. Those are full-time roles. Now, if you want a full-time role, go for it. That's a different conversation. But this is a guide to freelancing video, so that's a different thing. Zone 2, which is maybe 40K to 80, 90K, that's the gray area. And that's dangerous because you're really like taking a chance there. Like there are companies that do want to hire a full stack developer for $40,000. They think that's a realistic price. There are also contracts. Almost every contract I do is touching at least 40,000 and then up. That's a very standard contract number. It's a gray area, right? So you really don't know what you're getting there. But what you don't want is to go through 2 interviews, a coding challenge, a sample website, and all this stuff, and then find out they're hiring for a full-time role at $55,000, which I just wouldn't know, right? And that has happened as well. I'm speaking again from personal experience. These are all things that have happened to me. So ironically, what you want is zone 1, $1,000 to $25,000. Now, obviously, $1,000 isn't realistic. So really what you want is $10,000 to $25,000. That's a good number because those are contracts. There is no startup in America that is trying to offer a full-time software engineer role at $25,000. That's just not happening in this country. So you can proceed with confidence that this is a contract and that this is going to be a pure contract role, and then the rest is logistics. What's the rate? Is it going to be remote? Are you working on the same stack? Things like that. So that's why I always start here. Right now, this is, I guess, 20K pounds. So if I click on this, they're using a custom CRM, so that can be a pain, but everything else looks pretty standard. Yeah, React, TypeScript, 10 hours a week. Yeah, I would put in for this if I was in London. I don't know if this is remote. Yeah, you have to be in the UK. So if you're in the UK and you're watching this, this is a good thing to put in for as a contract. I would certainly put in for this as a contract. And on Angellist, you just click apply now, and it gives you a space for like a cover letter. Like I said in video 2, you should have that cover letter already prepared. Just have it ready and just copy, paste, boom, move on to the next one. And then, a lot of people say like, well, shouldn't you personalize it? Shouldn't you make it more, like tailored for each company individual? Like I do say, hello, and then the name of the contact. I do that, and that's about it. Like shouldn't you have 4 or 5 sentences and like why I want to work for this company? I don't do that because my portfolio speaks for itself. Like I said, everything is predicated on the strength of your portfolio. If you have a weak portfolio, you gotta play those games, and that's it. You gotta say, I really want to work for this company. I like what you guys are doing. I think it has a great potential. Blah 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 blah. I don't really care. I just want to make some money. Like those are the games you have to play if you're on the weaker side of the portfolio. My portfolio speaks for itself, and I say, here's my work. It fits what you're doing. If you like it, contact me. If not, no problem. I'm moving on to the next one, and that's it. And like I said, out of 10 inquiries, I average around 7 callbacks. Out of those 7, once I get to communication, the hit rate's about 50%. So like maybe 3.5. So like I'm batting around 350. So if I do 10 outreaches, I'll bring home 3.5 contracts. That's pretty much my number. That's fine by me. It's been keeping me busy for 6 years. So, but that's because my portfolio, the numbers weren't always like that. That the numbers were way worse when I was just starting out in 2012. Like an order of magnitude worse. I'd have to put in like 100 inquiries to bring home 3 contracts. Like it was just a different experience. Going back to what I was saying before, prepare to get rejected a lot. But if you just keep getting better and better and better, your numbers get better and better and better. And that's it. So let's go through a few more of these. No price at all. Morgan Walker. I think I actually know this guy. All right, whatever. So no price at all on this one. So I wouldn't really consider it. This is what I mean. This is the dangerous zone, the danger zone. Is that a contract rate? Is that a full-time rate? It's hard to tell. It says contract and remote, but 60K is a little high for an opening contract bid. I've never had a contract bid at 60K. Usually my bids are around 25, 30K. So it's like, it's too much of a danger zone, because if it's a full-time role, then that's a joke of a rate. That's a joke of a salary. If it's a contract, that's actually not bad, but it might be, it's hard to tell. So that's the danger zone. That's what I meant. Like, that's zone 2. Avoid that. Here is zone 1. Active this month. So this is certainly not a full-time salary. Obviously, what kind of startup is offering a full-time salary at 36K? That's the upper end of their whatever. So click on that. San Fran, very good sign, because if they're in the Bay Area, that means they probably raised money. You can basically just go to San Fran and say, I'm going to build a computer company, and you'll raise $1 million. So they probably raised some financing, and then that means they have money to burn and for development, so they're not going to be pinching pennies. Pretty light on the description, which is usually not a good sign, but at least their stack is it's the right, vocabulary. They passed the vocab test. So that's good. So I would put in for that, and that's it. So if they get back to me, great. If not, no harm, no foul. Right. So if you're watching this video relatively recently, March 24th, put in for it. See what happens. Right. Make sure, again, assuming you have a good portfolio. All of this is based on, do you have a good portfolio? If not, that's objective number 1. Same thing. That's the danger zone, zone 2. I'm going to go with that. They're looking for a full-time developer at that rate because they pushed up the lower boundary, so which means that's a complete skip. Same thing, just skip that. That zone is too ambiguous. This is clearly a full-time role. I don't know why they say contract, so don't just ignore that. So like I said, it's ironic. You actually want zone 1, the lowest one, for contracts. If you want to go full-time, only go zone 3. Basically, zone 2 is the worst zone. You don't want that for full-time, and it might just waste your time on contract. This is zone 1, but the upper end is kind of low. Not really sure how to feel about the China part. The reason the overseas stuff worries me is because the rates of exchange are so different, right? So, like, I don't know, but $5,000 might be a king's ransom in China. I don't know. So you might be negotiating like crazy for an extra $500, and do you really have time for that? Right? There's only 24 hours in a day. Do you really want to negotiate like crazy for an extra $200? Right? And in a country like India, that might be a month's salary for another developer. Again, I have no idea. I don't want to know. It doesn't concern me. I just want to work with people in the States or the UK where I understand the exchange rates, so I can negotiate with the proper context. Let's see, 40 hours a week, 20 hours. Yeah, I don't know about this one. I would put in if I was, I personally wouldn't put in for this, but if I was just starting out. So if you're watching this video and you're still like getting started, if I were in that position, I would put in for this, because then I could again just get the experience. Like it might be a good interview process. So okay, we'll just do one more of these and then move on. That's danger zone. It's kind of a high range. These are by far just the worst zones. Like, I don't know if those are contracts or what. Yeah, no price at all. That's not good. That's good enough that I would at least look into it. Mike Schwartz, I think I know that guy too. Okay, this looks like it was written by a recruiter. Yeah, mustache, that's what I teach in all my Turbo stuff. So SEO, PHP, MySQL. It's one of those typical, like, you have to know everything. Like, you gotta know React, Redux, Webpack, PHP, MySQL, WordPress. It's like, come on, dude. It's Laravel. Like, let's get serious. But the point is, it looks like it's a contract. It's a little high end for what this guy is looking for. So it's a little hard to tell, but this is just enough where I would be like, all right, let's put in and see what happens. And okay, so that's it. I mean, this is what I do. Well, this is what I used to do all the time, every day. And then, every day I would put in for maybe 2, 3, up to 5 a day. Sometimes just one. It all depends on the quality of what I find that day. And it's so more like in a given week, I might put in for 20 or so positions every week, 12 months out of the year, all the time. And I kept my pipeline full because you get people coming back to you. A lot of them would wash out. They just wouldn't be legitimate. They wouldn't really have the money, things like that. And you just kind of perpetually in that mode, right? And then over the course of the year, you're closing, a handful a year. If I built out a whole dev shop and had junior devs working under me, well, I have one right now, but if I did like a whole dev shop out of it and I did nothing but close deals, I can probably hit around one a week, maybe. So that's times 12 is 48. So I wouldn't hit 48 for the year. I'll probably hit closer to around 40 for the year, probably in that zone. Yeah, I probably hit that number. 35 to 40 is where I would hit. So more like 3 a month is where I would hit on a regular basis. Now I can't do 3 a month on my own, so I just sort of let the pipeline go until I find like a really good one, or I like my workload lightens up. And that's been my cycle again for like 5 years. Right? Basically what I did early on in 2012 is I realized that for me, the game is going to be volume based because I was getting such a low percentage. So I was applying like crazy to everything. That's like all I did for a long time. And then as I got better and better at closing deals and got just a better programmer, right? As that went on, I never lost that sort of volume approach. That part never went away. So I just kept doing it. I set up all these scripts and systems that would identify the leads on these boards and then populate my database with the leads that I would seriously consider, and then I would just fire them off, and that's it. It only took like 15 minutes a day, so it wasn't really a big deal. It was just part of my day. And I just 15, 20 minutes, sometimes longer if it was a good day. Like if it was a busy day, like I found a lot today. Today was I found a good, batch, and I applied to a lot. Maybe it's a half hour that day, but that's a busy day. So it's only a half hour. And if it's a slow day, 10 minutes at the most, maybe 5-10 minutes. And that's it. Just keep going, keep going. I must have easily had in the thousands of phone calls by now, like inquiries, initial phone calls, like, hey, we'd like to talk to you, that kind of thing. I've got to be well into the thousands by now. So my point is, if you're in the contract game, this is the game. This is it. You got to just constantly put yourself out there. And if you're not comfortable talking to people and closing deals, making sales, selling yourself, which is a lot of devs aren't comfortable with that, do not play this game. You're not going to win. Just don't play. You should be working full time for someone else. I'm constantly in a mode where I'm selling myself for whatever reason, whether that's contracting, selling turbo, trying to raise investment, talking to some girl at the bar, whatever. I'm just constantly selling myself. That is the reality of my life. And I'm okay with it. Like, I don't really, that's fine. Like, it doesn't bother me. If it does bother you, if you're afraid to do that, I've met quite a few programmers who are just not comfortable with this. Quit now. Find a full-time job, or just quit programming. Just do something else. Whatever. This isn't for you. All right, moving on. An increasingly good source of leads is now Slack. So I'm a member of about 15 Slack channels, all programming based. So let me just show you one right now. NYC Tech. Just about all of these have a job board. Jobs. This was Friday. Rubicon MD is looking for a talented Android developer, short-term contract. Hey, look at that. I didn't even see this one. So this is a good one. If you're an Android developer, this is a good one. I would put in for this anyway if you're a React Native developer. Just tell them that React Native will just compile it to Android. No problem. And just DM this guy with your portfolio. So what's good about Slack is for the most part, these are all legitimate leads. You don't get the usual trash you get on Craigslist and even Angellist now. Like you don't get that as much. That's probably going to change as time goes on. As word gets out more and more that Slack is a good source of developers. But for now, circa 2018, Q1 2018, it's still a pretty solid base because most of these are going to be like actual people. I have noticed more and more recruiters. This guy's probably a recruiter. Yeah, full-time on-site. C2C means corp to corp. That's what I do. I do a lot of corp to corp, which is basically my LLC bills another company that's corp to corp. So that's a contracting, like a freelance, like a concept. Okay, well, whatever. You get the idea. So Slack is an increasingly good source of leads that are legitimate as of now, and that'll probably remain the case for at least the next year to 2 years until it becomes sort of flooded with more, just people who like to waste your time. So another one that I have found good leads are off of is We Work Remotely. This is predominantly full-time jobs, but they're all remote. But every now and then you'll see the word contract or freelance pop up on here, and put in for it if it makes sense. I got one contract off this about a year ago. So yeah, it might happen, it might not. But these are all like legit full-time listings. So if you're looking for full-time, this is a good spot. So that's worth looking into. Another one is Hacker News, who's hiring. So Hacker News, who's hiring, March 2018. First weekday every month, Hacker News puts this up, and this is basically the home base of every Silicon Valley company in the United States for hiring guys like me and probably a little bit younger than me. And you're going to get a lot of contract on here. Just do a search for contract or freelance, and that's it. And I actually have never aggressively pursued positions off this, but for no good reason, just because usually my pipeline's full anyway. Let's see, freelance. Yeah, freelance, 15, 20 hours a week. Carrot, that's a good company. Seattle, Washington. That's an interviewer, though. Here we go. Senior front end, Brooklyn, freelance, blah, blah, blah. New parts of our website, React, Redux, Rails, yada, 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 same nonsense. If I had seen this 23 days ago, I certainly would have put in for it. That's a good lead. Front end, freelance, thread, London, UK, looks good. I mean, I didn't even click on it, but it's a good lead. These are all legitimate leads. There's no trash on this board. All right, whatever. Okay, so that's another good source. This is a very good source because this is 100% legitimate, or like 99%. Basically, every now and then a recruiter will show up on here and they get shouted down. So it's a reliable source but it's only one day a month. It's the first of every month. Now you don't want to look on the first. You don't want to do that. Wait, because it takes a while for it to fill up. So you want to look it up on the 3rd or the 4th. Basically, when the number of posts here clears 1,000, that's pretty much where it's going to end up. So if you look on the first, it's going to be like 300. You know, you're still passing up another 700. So just wait a couple days, and then they're not going to hire anyone in like 2 days. That doesn't really happen. So just wait a couple days. So really on like the 5th or the 4th, you want to look at that and just go through the whole thing and see what you get, and that's it. That's how it works. And again, it's all based on your portfolio. So if you don't have a good portfolio, don't play this game. Another one. So let's see, Reddit RNYC jobs. Same idea. This is mostly recruiters, though. Ironically, the recruiters have found out about this. And then for hire, this is another decent. You know, you'll find every now and then you'll find some decent leads on here. Okay, and that was my process. And like I said, I I sort of turned the engine back on the past month just to make sure I could still do it, so that I wasn't providing a video series that was full of crap. And I've proven it. I'm actually working one of those contracts, and so everything I'm explaining still works. Let's see here. With regard to startups in particular, the key is to hop on the trends on their way up. That's the key. So in 2012, what did I do? I focused on native iOS, and there was no other kind. It was iOS Objective-C. If I employed that strategy today, I would not be as successful as I was in 2012, even though I'm a much better iOS developer today. So what I did in 2016, 2 years ago, was I realized the upcoming trend is React Redux. That was 2 years ago, keep in mind. It seems like React Redux is like a new thing. It's not. It's been around for like 6 years, 5 years. But it didn't become a trend until around 2015, 2016. That's when it became like, oh, this is a cool thing. I saw that and realized, okay, this is just now breaking into the forefront. If I catch on to it now, when it becomes hot, when it reaches that inflection point, I will be there. And guess what? Here I am. And closing React Redux deals are pretty easy. So now what you need to be doing is identifying the trend in the next 12 to 24 months. And that's not in React Redux. Like that ship has sailed. Like that has now matured into the mainstream. So what you want to do is to find that next thing. The current contract I'm working on now, I'll tell you, I was in their office, and I was sitting with their dev teams, 3 other guys, all strong developers, good, smart people, and they were asking me like, you know, GraphQL, what's your thoughts about that? Or like AWS Lambda. And once they said Lambda, I was all over it. I was like, this, because Turbo is completely built on Lambda. Lambda is not full mainstream yet, right? But the cost benefits of Lambda are so compelling. It's just a matter of time before it hits the mainstream. Now, one of their biggest clients, I won't name them by name, but let's just say if you have a bank account, you probably have an account with this company. They are a client of my client, and they were like, do you have anyone on a team who can help us out with our Lambda integrations? That's this guy. Because none of the guys on the team were like, oh, we don't know how to get this even set up. Not only do I know how to get it set up, I built my entire company on Lambda, right? So I'm catching a trend before it hits that mainstream point, so that when Lambda becomes mainstream in 2019, 2020, I'll be right there. Same, and another thing is GraphQL and Apollo/MobX, one of those two. I would focus on one, but more GraphQL. I say Apollo because typically Apollo is matched up with GraphQL. Now is a good time to get into that. It's not quite mainstream yet, but it will be in about 12 months. I mean, it's almost starting to get late. We're kind of where React was in 2016. So you see what I'm saying? Like right now, React is a household name essentially amongst developers. If you don't know React as developers, like where have you been? Well, that's not quite GraphQL yet. So if you can hook onto that now and become really good and really comfortable at it now, circa 2019, 2020, when all those GraphQL contracts come in, it's going to be all the same thing too. We're switching our Mongo, no, well, it's not Mongo, but like we're switching our API to a GraphQL structure. Do you know how to set up a GraphQL server around a Mongo database, that kind of thing? And right now, those contracts are not superfluous. They're not really around, but they will be. And you want to be in the right spot for that. That's the smart move. The sort of the dumb move right now is to play catch up. Right? This is only for startup freelancers. If you're playing a lot of catch up, then you're just learning React Redux right now. It's too late. It's too late. You missed that boat. You need to move on to the what's coming down the pipe. And so the real skill there is being able to identify what's coming down the pipe. It's not really a skill for me. It's more just by osmosis. I just sort of see what's happening. I'm like, all right, that's get on that. Don't worry about this. And so I'm telling you right now, if you want to play in the startup game for freelancing, these are the right strategies. Okay, so that covers that. This video went a little bit long. I'm gonna piggyback some of my remaining points on the next video where I talk about actually how to close the leads, actually how to close deals, negotiate and close. That's part 4. But I'm gonna leave some key points in this video from part 3 for that video as well, because this is going a little bit long. However, hopefully you were able to follow what I did here and get a good sense of how to find leads and the general principles of reaching out to people, companies, and trying to get some interaction, some dialogue, so that you can get better at the whole sales pitch and whatnot. And then hopefully that works out for you. If you have any questions, any feedback, feel free to reach out to me on my Turbo account. That's my email, and that's it. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and I'll see you in video 4.